I figured that if I fall while going on stage, the worst and most embarrassing thing imaginable has already happened, and I don't have to worry about making the perfect talk anymore. I almost said no to do this talk because of that. Not the falling bit, to be honest, that was actually planned, but the part about not doing a perfect talk. I was so worried I was going to say the wrong things or not say the right things, and why would people, you guys, want to listen to what I have to say? I've always been a victim of what I call the good girl syndrome. Always behaving, giving it my hardest to get perfect grades, and then thriving on being told what a good girl I was. So isn't that ironic? That the very thing I'm here to talk about today almost made me not to do it, but at the same time made me do it, because you're not really being a good girl if you say no to a TEDx talk, are you? However, I am not primarily here because I used to be, and probably will always be, a victim of the good girl syndrome. I'm here because I work as a stuntwoman, exploding, crashing bikes, and falling down stairs for a living. It's the most amazing job in the world. And every project I do, I'm so grateful and happy to get to do something I feel I was meant to be doing all along. I grew up wrestling and horseback riding and pole vaulting. Growing up, I wanted to become the best in the world at whatever sport I was pursuing, to become the strongest and fastest athlete of all time. That is, until somewhere in my teens, my will to be strong was suddenly outweighed by this unexplainable desperation to be skinny. I started to think about this in the light of the profession I have now. How when I double, I switch places with the actress for the part of the scene that's a bit more risky or requires a bit more physical strength or ability. I not only try to look as much as the actress as possible, but I also try to mimic the way the character moves. And I've found that I so often have to make my movements look weak or small, or like I just don't know what I'm doing. And I've found that the women I pursue often fit into this very narrow stereotype. This summer, for example, I did a bicycle crash. I was flying headfirst over the handlebars in high heels and a dress. And that crash, it looks kind of rough and hard. It looks like it hurts. And after the first take, the director asked me if it was possible to make the crash look a bit more graceful. So when a woman does make a mistake, like crash a bike, at least she does it gracefully. About the same time this became a pattern to me, I started to realize that there's another pattern. I realized that too often women, including myself, are excluded from more physical situations before even given the chance to prove that they belong. And not because of lack of skill or any other sensible explanation. I've chosen a few situations I've been in as a stuntwoman that has made me come to the realization that for all our sakes, especially young girls and boys, we need to stop excluding women, and we need to stop the narrow and shallow way of portraying women in film and in TV and games. Because why not? So the important thing for me that you realize is that I'm not up here telling you that I want there to be 50% women in the fight scenes or the action movies. To me, that's just not relevant. What I want is that the deal breaker regarding who's in those fight scenes or whatever the situation might be is skill and hard work and dedication, not gender. So the first time this became obvious to me, I was watching a rehearsal of a fight scene at one of the largest theater stages in Sweden. They were just moving on to the fight scene, so the director told the women in the ensemble up on stage to go to the back of the crowd. And the men chosen to do the fighting to go to the front. So I looked around and no one else seemed to be bothered by this or even think twice of what he was asking. So I thought, like you were probably thinking, that these guys were chosen to tell this story because they had stage fighting experience or some kind of physical ability. I'm not going to tell you where this was, so it's okay for me to tell you that these guys, they had no idea what they were doing. Not when it came to the stage fighting or the physical ability. So obviously, these guys were chosen to tell this story not because of their skill, but because of their gender. The women were told to sit this one out because of not because of their lack of skill, but because of their gender. The storytellers, they wanted a violent scene, so prejudice and tradition chose the men to be a part of telling this story, and the women were excluded before even given the chance. This was an historical play, so if I'd asked for the motive behind this situation, it probably would have been something to do with that historically women didn't fight that much in the streets. It was usually the men doing that. Which is pretty much the same thing that enrages the players of the game Battlefield now that you have the choice to play as a woman. I did motion capture for the first trailer that was released, and I was so proud. My male stunt colleagues have been doing motion capture for the previous Battlefield games for ages, and now because of this new female soldier, I got to be there and pursue my passion for stunts and tell this story. The trailer was released and people were outraged. Women in World War II. Yes, there were very few women in the war compared to the men, but they were there as undercover agents, as soldiers on the front lines, as medical personnel and as mechanics. They were there, and I love this addition to the game, not only because I got to be there and kind of explode and jump out of tanks and dodge bullets on the ground, but because this way, more stories get told. I have two other situations I'd like to talk with you about today. The first one was we don't want to promote violence towards women. And the other one was we're afraid she'd look silly if she did that. So the first one I heard was when they were looking for a small and short guy to be a part of a trio of stereotypically badass characters, and they were getting their asses kicked by this really cool main character. So the shorter guys were all booked, so the stunt coordinator put me up as an option. Absolutely no women, they told him. Because they didn't want to promote violence towards women. So instead of choosing to portray this badass, strong woman, they excluded women from the beginning. And even though so much violent crime is committed between men, but still that's okay to promote. The last explanation I heard was when I was doing a job featuring a girl out running. So we wanted her to do some cool flips and parkour, and that's why I was there. But in the end, we barely did any flips because they were worried she would be perceived as silly if she did that. The important thing was that she was just smiling. Now, isn't that really sad? That as soon as a girl does something that's out of the ordinary, prejudice rules that she's silly or she's trying too hard. With this mentality, no wonder women shy away from pursuing their passion in fields that are nowadays not stereotypically female. Like Science, for example. My sisters are pursuing careers in science. They're up there. They're bright and talented and hardworking women. And they had pretty much the same thoughts about going into their careers as I had during this talk. Am I really good enough? What if I make mistakes and fail? What if I can't do it? The fear of failure and not being flawless, it was part of so many women's lives. By telling more stories of women who make mistakes, who get hurt, who fight, I really do believe we can inspire women in all fields to at least give it a try and see what happens. Do not let their fear of failure or being flawed stop them from doing what they dream of or have a passion for. One really cool and bright girl told me when she was about to start the 7th grade that she had decided to just scrap all the beauty expectations and just be who she is. No more spending her mornings putting makeup on and curling her hair because, as she put it, society and social media tells her to do it. Apart from, filling out her eyebrows a little, because otherwise she would just not be comfortable in going to school. 7th grade, 12 years old, and can't go to school without perfect eyebrows. I know there's an insane amount of pressure when it comes to physicality for boys as well, but the fact is that an estimated 90% of people suffering from eating disorders in Sweden are female. And studies show that a majority of those suffering from stress and anxiety and depression are girls and women. What if we could show little girls growing up that to be confident and proud, what you need is to be tough and strong and brave and sometimes a little badass, not perfect eyebrows. So why do I react to these situations? And what does that have to do with the good girl syndrome? Why do I think women should be in the fight scenes? Female characters should be in all kinds of games, and a woman doing flips should not risk being called silly. I never knew I wanted to be a stunt woman. Growing up, no tree was too high, or a mountainside too steep, or challenge too big. But apart from, dreaming about being the best, I never wanted to be a stunt woman. Instead, my dream was to be a beautiful actress or a supermodel. Even though none of my interests had anything to do with that. Growing up, I wanted to be strong. But I also wanted to be everybody's little princess. I was terrified of anyone not liking me. And all I wanted was for people to think, what a good girl Nilla is. I never spoke up. I never fought for what I wanted. And I willingly went to the back of the crowd so many times. I wanted to be perfect. Because of that, I have spent years and years fighting against anxiety and eating disorders. And I still ask myself, how did that strong wrestler go from kicking ass at everything she did to letting her life revolve around nothing else than to not gain weight? By choosing to include women in a wider variety of storytelling, as the bad guy, as the one who crashes the car, as the one who picks the fight, and as the one who falls face first to the ground. I genuinely believe we can inspire and promote kicking the good girl syndrome's ass and being who you want to be or whatever you want to be. I hope I have inspired you to buy the films and games that include all kinds of characters. And if you have children, be thoughtful of what games they're playing or what shows they're watching. And if you believe there are storylines or characters that are missing, why not send an email or drop a comment to the company that's producing those films or those games? Your words will inspire those creating games or films to think outside the box. Because that's what's so incredible about this. New stories are written every day. Be the change you want to see in the world, right? I don't want more women to have to grieve the years they lost chasing an unreachable goal of perfection. Instead, I want all women to get to celebrate the years they spent going all in for their passion, their talent, and their dreams. If broadening the way we tell female stories can inspire just one girl to be brave and strong and go after what she believes in, then why not?